hi again, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Furman Athletics. I am Dan Scott. Good to have you with us. This, of course, is a guy who needs no introduction. The athletic director, vice president for intercollegiate athletics, Jason Donnelly. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm doing good, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Doing well.
Good.
First day of spring as we're recording this, and
we are so blessed. We have the best view. We were just talking about this, sitting together, looking over Paladins Stadium, and trees are starting to bloom, and Paris Mountain's right in the background. We just love this environment we have. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I keep asking you to let me charge for people to come up here and see it. You keep saying no. So
and the thing is, they would pay.
Yes, they would.
A day with Dan. We might have to start marketing that.
So how have you been? It's been a while. I know not like you've not been busy at all, right?
Yeah, right. No, doing really, really good. And as you and I had a chance to talk about what this is for us, this is our first time, I think, being together since probably November-ish. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that's gone on, with football and with other things that have taken place. But we talked about looking back a little bit. I think 2023, if you go back to that year, was just a phenomenal year for Furman Athletics, for our department. We've had a chance to digest it, to look back and say what was accomplished. And from a fan standpoint, from an institutional standpoint, athletic department standpoint, every possible metric that you'd want to accomplish in that year got accomplished. And if you take back to football, we haven't had a chance to talk about how amazing that experience was in FCS playoffs and that game at Montana, and knowing that we had a chance to advance further with that special team that we had. We also talked about coming out of that fall, the success of the men's and women's cross-country team with 11 straight championships and what that's meant for them. Fundraising's been amazing. Obviously, Timmons Arena getting done. Getting through that process was an incredible accomplishment for our department, and just things on campus. We had a department meeting last week with our president and our CFO, Susan Maddox, and just to be able to express that when you look at where Furman University is, I'd say 9 out of 10 things at this institution are absolutely awesome, and things are really, really good. And we'd be remiss because you and I were having a conversation. I know your family has gone through a very difficult loss, and we've been here for you, and we're continued to be for your family. But you talked about running into Bryce Stanfield's parents, on Saturday at the spring game, and that was immeasurably hard for Furman, for the football program, for not even to mention the family themselves. But I couldn't be prouder. It was one of those times where you just really had a strong sense of pride in what this community is, what our values are, what our leadership is, what our people, the faith, the prayers, the feelings, the way that Bryce has been celebrated before his passing and after, just remarkable, and the amount of people that reached out during that time. So as hard as that was, and that's the worst, there's nothing worse than losing a member of your family. I'm just immeasurably proud and grateful for the community for the way that everyone rallied around Bryce's passing.
Yeah, it was great to see them here on Saturday at the spring game, and it's the first time I'd really had a chance to talk to them at the public memorial they had here. There were so many people there, and the line of teammates and friends and family. I didn't get through the line, so it's the first time I've had a chance to see them, but to get a chance to hug them and tell them we're thinking about them and praying for them, and just reminding them to stay engaged with because this is their family as well.
And I think that, as we look down on the field here, there's a 97, on the field as a part of that. And they show up at the memorial and the viewing in their jerseys in 97. And they said, they shared at the memorial that in spite of everything that's taken place, there's no other place that would have rather Bryce be in this community and with the people that are here. But we've encouraged them and extended encouragement for them to be here with us, and that's everything. That's everything from spring games to commencement to there's upcoming awards coming up in April that Bryce is going to be a part of, and then next season. And I think that's one of the things that really makes Furman special. In spite of the tragedy, just the sense of connection that they feel to other parents, that they feel to people that are part of the football program. Yourself included, the players, this atmosphere, and I hope that others can find a similar sense of community here at Furman regardless of the interest, whether it's football or it's basketball or softball or whatever your connection is, but that there's a sense of connection that this university can provide. I know I feel it with my family. We feel this strong sense of connection to the people and to the values and to the institution as a whole, so we just love it. And I think that's when we talk about Furman Family, what it's all about.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, and we'll move on. Any place you go, they're going to throw that. We're a family out there, and like all families, there are squabbles that go on that people never see. But it's the tough times when you really find out whether you're a family or not.
Yep.
And I think that has been on full display. I know it has been for my family, and I know it's been for Bryce's family as well.
Yeah, and I say this all the time to our staff and to our students. I mean, a really special place is there for you on your best of days and your worst of days. And you don't know what those worst days are going to be. And I've lived through that life. I understand, unfortunately, what that is. And when you learn how hard life can be, you look at the people who are around you and how they support you and how they step up. And then the best days, those feelings and those emotions and those celebrations. And there's a consistency when it's there. And one of the things I really try to impart also about Furman, I say this a lot, is that if you're looking for perfect, and I talk about myself, or you're talking about our staff, or you're talking about our coaches, or what we do, if you're looking for perfect, don't look here, because we're not perfect, nor do we want to be or do we strive to be. That's not our mission. We just want to be the best Furman that we can be and figure out how to work through those things and figure out how to be real and authentic in that space. And I think that's just who we are at Furman, and I think when you work through those things and that understanding of what you're trying to be, you can really be the true Furman Paladins that you wish to be. And I'm grateful that Bryce's family was a part of that time with us, and we were able to be there for them because it was authentic and real. The feeling that the team had in the hospital together with him as President Davis conferred his degree will be something I'll never forget. And his parents won't, and Bryce was there to live and be a part of that. So, that's what's been going on.
Yep. Speaking of things that are not perfect.
Yeah.
Right before we started recording this on Tuesday, early Tuesday afternoon, Clemson filed a lawsuit against the Atlantic Coast Conference, joining Florida State, which has done the same thing, to exit the conference, and don't know all the full details about it. But this really shouldn't catch anybody by surprise, and it speaks to things that you've talked about in previous episodes of Inside Furman Athletics when your time slot has come up, that the world is changing, and what happens at the top is going to have some effect on everybody down below. We just don't know how all of it's going to shake out right now.
Yeah, and Dan shared this with me when I walked up here, and I've been in meetings all morning, so I have not been checking the news. And this is not unexpected. I think for the casual fan, it's not something that we're unexpected. I think this speaks to the larger concern about where we are when it comes to the NCAA and athletics at large. One of the writers, Dan Wetzel, had an article yesterday that talked about this divide when it comes to the Power Two and the impact of the Big Ten and the SEC as things move forward. The fact that the college football playoff distributions and what that means for college athletics as a whole. It's just a lot of change, and I think we're in a period where we're going to see a measurable change. I know for Clemson, they have felt the struggle when it comes to a TV contract that was signed and agreed on probably a decade ago or 15 years ago when it was signed, that this was the best deal ever, and that things change and that contracts change and allocations of resources change. And for them as an institution, they are working to be at the top of that pyramid when it comes to distributions and how they fit into that. We at Furman, the one thing that we are fortunate with is we're not as affected by the change at the top. So even though we watch this closely and we monitor this closely, a number of the issues that you're going to see there, whether it is employment or conference or TV, it's just a bit of a different model than where we are. Where we're working hard to remain competitive is in space, and that we work within advocacy is to continue the Division I model with everyone underneath the same umbrella, that we're able to compete in the spaces across the board. But we have to really know who we are and know what we're capable of doing and where we go with this. So we stay very close to what those topics are. We're at a little bit of a tipping point. You're going to start to see things that are going to start to change. And I don't think all of these things are overnight changes. I think these are changes over the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years that you're going to start to see, but just a changing evolution of the course. A lot of these things can't be figured out, because the leadership structure is one that you have NCAA leadership, and you've got college football leadership, and you get institutional leadership. So I think some of these things you're going to see, they're going to take place over time, but we're following that very closely. The other point, kind of the segue through that's a challenge when you look at college athletics to date for more of a Furman, is just challenges when it comes to higher education. Enrollment is a challenge when you're talking about a increasingly smaller enrollment generation. The number of students that are able to and planning to go to college is a challenge when colleges look at it on the enrollment side. Challenges in demographics when you're talking about private schools versus states in terms of what they're offering and where students are going. The ability to pay for college and the ability to see that return on investment. So Furman's working very hard to position ourselves for the next century in terms of where we are headed. And then that has an impact on budget. What are the resources that you have available to you, which are some of the things that we've been discussing from a leadership level to try to position the athletic department to be successful. And as much as it's encouraging and discouraging, I was on a group call yesterday with a bunch of ADs, like, where we are is where everyone else is. And I know that sounds crazy, but schools at the top of the pyramid are going through challenges when it comes to resources, Clemson included. Schools that are smaller schools, such as us, are going through challenges when it comes to resources. Budgets not getting increased, reductions in certain spaces, challenges when it comes to shared funding. And I think it speaks to a larger challenge when we talk about higher ed. Some of the things that you're seeing when it comes to money, those things are driving departments of that size and scale that are literally running like NFL operations, or they're running like NBA operations and the expectations. But we talk a lot about economies of scale, in terms of that's one economy of scale in terms of what they produce. And then the economy of scale for us at a small liberal arts private school has got to fit what we are. So part of what we got to do is celebrate the successes that we do have in the spaces that we do have and continue to find competitive ways to have resources so we can be competitive in that space.
Well, it's a soap opera that is going to continue to move forward, and we'll continue to keep an eye on it and see what happens. But the other things going on here, we've got our spring sports calendar starting. Basketball season has come and gone, and you want to roll all of that into maybe leading into what we talked about this week in that meeting you referenced with Timmons. And while all the focus is what the renovation of Timmons is going to do for the basketball program, it's going to have an effect really on the entire athletic department.
Yeah, it was great to be able to announce the board approval and the completion of the fundraising for that second phase, which is the arena construction on the building as a whole. But this is just a great opportunity for Furman University to continue to step forward. One of the things I think about, like, we're sitting here in the Pierce Horton Center. It's built in 2014. This building has had a phenomenal change on the football program. It screams excellence when you walk up to the front door, when you go through the building, the purposes that it serves for the team, for the staff, for the donors, for the alumni, for our media, all these different things. And these are the type of investments that you have to make as an institution. Like Pierce Horton building, when I'm interviewing at Furman, made an impact to me when I saw, hey, this is a commitment to excellence that they have with the football program and with the facilities that they have. And then likewise, Timmons, when I got there, said this is just not up to par. It was one of the first things that we looked at when I got here. And it was really clear directive from the board that was an area that we wanted to grow and then we wanted to fundraise and get up to par. One of the things that I sometimes hear also on kind of conversations or fan side or just kind of inside stuff, like everyone looks at different athletic departments differently. Are we a football school? Are you a basketball school? Or what are you? We're here at Furman. We're not a football versus basketball. It's football and basketball. I've literally said that since day one, since I got the job, in terms of what our points of emphasis was and what we're trying to do with our department. And the way we have it positioned, we talk about this with our department, everyone here has certain expectations when it comes to academic excellence and wellness and belonging and fundraising and community and collaboration. But we are here to compete to win, and everyone has an opportunity to win, and there's an expectation to compete for championships, regardless of the sport that you're in at Furman. But there is an emphasis on revenue generation sports, which for us are football and basketball, and how important that is. Timmons Arena is going to be one of the things that's going to help us recruit, retain, provide an experience, allow us to show the level of excellence that we can be, and continue to move things forward. And one of the most important things is going to be the revenue that that building produces that it currently can't. You've got to have a building that can help support your operation in this space. And that's what schools of our size and scale have to do. You've got to maximize opportunities with football. You've got to maximize opportunities with basketball. Just in a short time, without me even trying to solicit these, we've had opportunities come back to us for people that want to be a part of that arena and want to be in there as a part of that we've seen changes that are positive impacts in terms of what that is. The other part, too, is just distribution of revenue. When you have an athletic department that has more revenue coming in, you're able to support the greater good at a higher level. So that's where ticket sales and sponsorships and opportunities and all those different things. So we do look at Timmons as a very significant long-term investment that's going to positively impact the department. And then the last part of that is just a rising tide rises all boats. Like, we want that high tide to take everything up. So I said this during the press conference, we're just getting started. That building is just one of the pieces of what we're trying to do to lift this program up. And I went around the room in the department. I mean, if you've seen positive increases with the golf program since we've been here, you've seen positive increases with the tennis program since we've been here. We've seen positive increases with football and soccer and cross country and across the board. And if anywhere that we need more positive increases, it's going to be some of our women's sports, such as softball or volleyball or lacrosse that need some more attention when it comes to them. But this is a rising tide, lifts all boats, and we're excited about where this is all headed.
Well, it's certainly created a lot of buzz in campus, in the community, and I know that we've got a lot of work to do, and there's going to be a year of displacement. But when it's all said and done, if the architects are able to do what the renderings say,
they can do it.
It's going to be
awesome.
The best facility in our conference, bar none.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. We're excited about it. And we're grateful to the donors. I mean, none of this happens without the 200 people that gave to this process. And, we had one landmark donor, Ravenel Curry, who really set us forward in terms of what that opportunity is and his generosity. But the Timmons family, the Pelham family, for what they've done to drive that family legacy forward. There's 10 different donors who have given it $1 million, some of which wish to be recognized, some of which want to be anonymous. There's been over 30 different donors that gave 6-figure gifts to this project. So it's truly been a collaborative effort, and I think it's really special. But, yes, the building would be the best in our conference in terms of what we're trying to do, and really speaks to the standard that we want to have with basketball, the same as we do with football, is that we're here year in, year out to attempt to win the Southern Conference and to attempt to be in the NCAA tournament and FCS playoffs. That's what we're here to do. And last year, Furman University was the only institution in the country to have an FCS playoff win and an NCAA tournament win. So in that year, 2022, 2023, the only one in the country to have an FCS playoff win and NCAA tournament win is just an unbelievable feat. And some of it's classification, that what Alabama might be doing or what another institution might be doing, but what we're doing at our size and scale for where we are, we're definitely doing a great job. And that's not taking anything away from cross country or golf or tennis or anyone else that's there. But the spirit of this is to continue to push forward and be successful.
Well, we've got some questions to get to, and I know your time is limited, but did you have anything else you wanted to get to before we got into the fan questions?
No, let's go into the questions. Everything's in a great spot, and I'll share some upcoming events at the end.
All right, well, the first one we had was about expectations obviously being raised for the basketball program and then dealing with success versus failure. And coming off of that sparkling 2022-23 season, with the year that was just completed and your basketball background, have you had any advice for Coach Bob Ritchie coming off of the season that just wrapped up?
Yeah, absolutely. My background is in coaching and head coach for over 20 years, and I've lived through this. I've seen, I don't want to say I've seen everything, but I've seen a lot. And I've lived through seasons where you exceed expectations and you're on fire, and there's other seasons where you just don't measure up to what your expectations may have been. And I'm very proud of the program. That's one of the things I kept reiterating to Bob throughout the year, is that this is a journey that we go through. And what you learn through this process is that sometimes when you have a phenomenal year like we had 2 years ago, It's the following year that you begin to learn how do you work through those things and how do you meet those expectations in that given year, right? We've had years we've been national champions, and the next year it just felt like a disappointment in terms of what it was, and then win the national championship the next year. So there's a range of emotions of where you went through.
Now, wait a minute. You win a national championship one year and lose to Furman the next.
Yeah.
When you were at Villanova, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that happened.
I know it happened.
And it's it was an incredible journey. And then, truth be told, I knew right where we were when that game was and what we, at that point when I was at Villanova, what that was, where we were as a program, and what we were doing well and what we weren't doing well. And that team wound up winning the Big East championship that year. So, that was a really, really good team that at that point was vulnerable. And what I've tried to help Bob with in this process for him is just the bigger picture of what we're all going through, the expectations around this, the patience, to work through all these things. And that season, I'd say was consistency was the challenge. That they had some huge wins and some huge opportunities. And I think some of the challenges you go through, going all the way back to the MTE in Myrtle Beach, or one possession games with Tulane or Princeton, UAB, who just won the American, could have been a game that they win. And it's one of those things when you're fully right, when you got all your mechanisms working together, those one possession games that go your way. It's a game at Sanford when we're down and we come all the way back and we're winning with a minute to go, and it comes down to one or two things. In the season where all things click, all those things take care of themselves in that process, and your team comes together. And when you're not clicking 100%, part of the job as a coach is to figure out how do I overcome all those things, and how do I put a team out there that can present things really well. For me, I'll go back to the Western Carolina game. That's a huge win, to go to the Asheville, to have that game, a very equally matched game, to play against the conference player of the year. That was a great win to finish the season. And even at the Sanford game, there was opportunities for them to do what they needed to do, but the inconsistency from within did not allow them to do that. And in some seasons, you just don't have the ability to do that. And that's why when they get to NCAA tournament time and you hear the broadcaster talk about body of work is when you look at the whole season as a whole and you say, okay, what did you do in the non-conference? What did you do in the conference? What did you do in the tournament? Is there a measure of consistency that's there? But the expectation is really clear. And Bob is here to win Southern Conference championships. He knows it. That's where we expect that program to be. We expect the same with football and basketball year in, year out, that they're competing to be Southern Conference champions. And this year it was disappointing in the sense they weren't in that mix for that. But the expectations for them to get back there, and the expectation is high, and that's where Coach Ritchie wants it. It's where the team wants it, and that's where our fan base wants it. So I fully expect to be back there soon.
And one of the things that is true, whether it's in sports or in life, is that you learn the greatest lessons when you're in the middle of adversity and coming out of that. So for Bob, for the players, it's a learning experience.
I'd also say you got to also learn how to win, learn how to handle losing. But part of that also is learning how to come out of a period of time when you win at that level. I think that's something that sometimes people don't understand. And winning at that level means winning for, they won the regular season. They won the tournament. They beat Virginia. They set a record for wins. You're at the ultimate high. So how do you come down from that, and how do you work through that process coming out of that? And I think both Bob, the staff, and the team, they're all going to learn a lot about what that experience was. And for me, I've been a part of that. I've seen the highs and the lows of that. I've been a part of a team that was ranked number 2 in the country, and everyone was miserable. And we had to revamp a lineup because it wasn't working the way we wanted it to be. But we're number 2 in the country, and from inside we knew, hey, this isn't working. In terms of what this is going to be. Those are all part of the journey that you go through. What you figure out about yourself. And I think Bob and the team are going to learn a lot about that. I think it's going to make them stronger. But there's no excuses. There's no things here. But being supportive of him, being supportive of the team, seeing where this is going. And acknowledging success and failure is a part of that journey you go through as a program.
All right, moving on. Your counterpart at ETSU has rattled some cages for the second or third time last week, making some comments Basically, and this is my phrasing, the private schools in the Southern Conference being somewhat archaic and wanting to do things, quote, the way they're always done, and the other schools wanting to do other things like allow players the freedom to transfer without having to sit out a year, which they cannot do in the Southern Conference. What were your thoughts when you saw those comments?
Yeah, number one, disappointed, and not disappointed in the way that ETSU feels. They have every right to feel the way that they feel. It's their agenda. It's their feelings of what it is. Disappointed in the way that message has been shared when it comes to what your expectations are as an athletic director and how that all fits in together. We've got a great conference. We got a dynamic new commissioner that's doing great work. We've got ADs and institutions that are committed to success academically and athletically. And ETSU, Doc's been great. I mean, I've really enjoyed working with him. I think this is the wrong way to go about it in terms of how you share it. There's a way to go about things and how you go about it. If you had 10 different schools that were getting on their podcast and bashing each other, it's a recipe for disaster that doesn't work out well. The ADs in the conference have great rapport, and Doc in this case, reprimanded by the conference and reprimanded by the commissioner for the outbound comments. Now, the 25 years back is not accurate. I wasn't here 25 years ago, so I can't tell you what they were doing 25 years ago. But the conference has been progressive, and the conference has had really good conversations. Where the challenge in this is the unique thing about the Southern Conference. It's banded together by history, tradition, regionality, common purpose. But there's an element of it within the conference that we all know and have to acknowledge is that you have private schools, you got public schools, you got academies. So you have three different sets of agendas that are really important to the institution. And where the commissioner corrected ETSU on this isn't a private school thing that's being driven. Anything we do is driven by what's the greater good and what's the consensus. So if the private schools wanted to push something forward to get it done, we don't have enough votes to push it forward by ourselves, just the same as the public schools don't and the academies don't. It's a conference-wide decision on what you think is best here. The challenge that we have is that our demographic is so different. It's something I had to help our leadership and our board know when I got here. I remember one of the first board meetings, they're comparing our finances to other Southern Conference schools. I said, guys, we're totally different. We're a private school. Our tuition costs this. Our operations are this. We can't get kids into school like a state school and get kids from overseas that pay state tuition. There's just a difference in terms of how we operate and what we do. So getting the consensus is really important. The league has made proactive decisions moving forward, but some of the things around finances, cost of attendance, there's an element where my job, number one, is to represent Furman. Mm-hmm. What's the best interest of Furman, and how do we get things where we need them to be for Furman? My second responsibility in this case is to the conference in terms of what we do as a conference and how do we work together in that space, and we're doing that well. There's points where there may be an advantage for a public institution versus a private institution that we have to say, okay, we can't do that, so we've got to find a level playing field if that's a space. So give you an example. Like, there's no restrictions in our conference on NIL. There's no restriction in our conference on Austin. There is a cap on cost of attendance because it's something that we can't do that another school might be able to do. Now, we can lose that vote if someone wants to say, hey, we don't want to do that way, but there is a part where competitive imbalance in a conference can take you out of whack in that. Our job is to either advocate for a position that we feel or allow it to go forward. For the most part, we've been permissive in all these different spaces. So to me, I don't think we're backwards in any way in terms of what that is. The concept of the transfer rule is something that can be debated nationally. The Southern Conference is the only conference in America that doesn't allow interconference transfers. Now, they do allow them if you sit out for a year. They do allow them if you graduate. They do allow them, if you don't receive aid. Like if you're a walk-on, you can transfer. So there are ways to transfer, but within the dynamic of our conference, the reason we don't have interconference transfer rule is to allow there to be collegiality amongst each other. There's a difference when you're recruiting players from your teams against each other, and you're looking at other people's rosters saying, okay, who can we get from that team to join us? The greatest disadvantage for this would be the academies. You got kids at the Citadel and VMI that won't be there if those rules aren't in place. And then the private schools were at a disadvantage in certain cases if that takes place, because you've got a rule that's allowing there to be freedom of transfers from within the conference. So that's just something as a conference we don't agree on. The better way for Doc to handle this as you go forward in that situation, whether it's him or it's any other school, is just to advocate from within, discuss it from within, have the dialogue that we have in these meetings, and determine if you can have the votes to move that thing forward. Some of these policies that are in place, they're going to change. Some of these policies that are there, they're there for a reason. So nothing within a conference is in stone. If anything, we've got to do a better job of sticking together, working together, advocating for the conference, finding ways to help each other in that space, and also having dialogue in the room that discusses these things. But one of the things I know also, like, there may be things important to Furman, and in that room, we may not get what we want, but the only choices I have in that is either to accept it or to move on. So as you're part of that process, if you don't like what your conference is doing, then you need to find another conference, and that's part of what that is. But there is a workable place, and the ADs I've talked to and the people that were part of that process and the way the commissioner handled it make it clear that that just was not the appropriate way to handle it. And the reality is those issues, that's not a factual statement that's being made as a part of that. But we'll continue working forward and working together, and we'll figure out what we got to figure out.
All right, moving on. You mentioned NIL. Combining two separate questions here because they both go kind of in the same direction. How proactive is Furman in trying to retain athletes under NIL? And then there are a lot of rumors floating around about the amount of money that the Power 5 or Power 6 basketball schools are willing to pay. And are those numbers from what you've seen accurate, especially if they're coming after players at schools at this size?
Yeah, so a couple different things on that topic. So first, name, image, and likeness, NIL, is something that we support. It's the right thing to do for students. Name, image, and likeness also is a gateway to considering revenue distribution or student athletes as employees in the future. These topics are going to continue to happen, particularly when you look at the amount of money that is around what they're starting to call the Power 5, but the Power 2. That revenue distributions and student athletes, employees, the future of this is certainly appropriate when you're talking about schools that are making $100 million a year when it comes to athletics. That's something that should definitely be engaged. We at Furman are in a different situation. We are dependent on student subsidy to operate. We have a budget that comes from the university each year that we have to pay our scholarships with or have to pay our staffing with in that space. So name, image, and likeness is an opportunity, but it's really market-driven. If your market dictates it that you can do it, then you can do it. And if your market doesn't, then the dollars just won't be there. We are supportive of NIL. There are collectives that exist around football and basketball for Furman. They're not an egregious or out-of-control space. That's not what this is. But it's an opportunity and an asset, not just for those two sports, but we also have it set up that every athlete can benefit. So if you have a soccer player who has just a great following and it's an opportunity for them to do that, or if someone wants to run a camp or someone wants to have their own business, they can do those things for specialty areas that they have. Article in the Post and Courier recently talked about one of our softball players who has a cooking business and how she's able to do that now. She wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago if she wasn't allowed to do that. That's Hannah from softball. But the numbers that you're hearing in the media, and I can't quote all of them, but yeah, there's a lot of collectives and there's a lot of NIL going on at the higher level with revenue sports. And I don't know the numbers that we're specifically stating, but in some cases, those rumors and those stories are real. It's become a recruiting thing that in some ways it just would be impossible to compete with some of the resources that we're competing against. I will tell you from my perspective that if you're a larger school that has revenue, then NIL makes sense because you might not be investing in other areas when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to student experience, when it comes to whatever those things that you need to fundraise for, to provide for. NIL makes sense. There's only so many buckets to go around, so they got to choose what the buckets are that they're going to look to fill. For us at Furman, we do have name, image, and likeness opportunities with our student athletes. They are creative. There are things that happen outside of Furman from a third-party perspective that are all compliant and legal. But I'd say they're more supplemental. They're supportive. I think I think Furman is aggressive in NIL space in the sense that we have really good partnerships in that space, but at the same time, and I think we do it probably best in the Southern Conference, amongst the best. The top of the conference consistent with what we do in other areas. But even door to door, we couldn't compete with everyone else that's out there. There's been stories, school more comparable to us, Charleston. Well, Charleston's got a really supportive NIL or collective that they would have for their basketball program. Well, the difference that they have is that they've done their infrastructure, they have their buildings, they have their budgets, they're further along in their process of what they got to do as an athletic department. So it would make sense that they would fundraise for those different spaces. So is there a process in place? Yes. Is it something that's managed, through the compliance and through those third parties? Yes, it's done the right way. Can we compete? Yes, we can compete, but can we do everything? No.
Are you concerned about tampering?
Yeah, tampering's an issue. Tampering's a real issue, and tampering is an issue not for Furman. Tampering's an issue for college athletics. Yeah, it's across the board. And the challenge with tampering and the impact it can have on a team is that when it's happening with people who are committed to your organization that are doing the right thing, and when that infiltration takes place, it's taking place. But Dan, I'm going to tell you, tampering was taking place 15 years ago when I was coaching. Tampering's been taking place 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. There's always been tampering as a part of it. The difference now is that it's much more mainstream and it's much more accessible and it's much more available. So you're going to see it more. What we don't want to have is we don't want to be a farm system for bigger schools. We don't want to. I look at what we've been doing. Like if you look at, we got a 94% retention rate in the middle of COVID and in the middle of the highest era of the transfer portal. We're doing the right things. We're going to have times we're going to lose kids. We're going to have times we're going to lose people. But what 94% retention rate amongst all our athletes tells me is we're doing the right things to retain them for the right reason.
Yeah, you want to hear some great stories about tampering and back channels. Go do some research years ago on the recruiting battle between Clemson and Georgia over Herschel Walker. Oh, man. But there are some great stories there.
But that's what we're saying is that this has been going on for a long time. And I think the difference is now is that this has opened a gateway to this being a more mainstream conversation, that maybe in the past might be something that was happening, off the record. But amongst our teams that we have, amongst all the Furman athletic teams that we have, we've got a 100% graduation rate. So if you put those statistics together, we're doing the right things. One of the conversations has been about Marcus Foster, for example. Well, we sit down, we talk about it. With Marcus. Marcus did the right thing, walked in my office and shared his thoughts for why. Marcus has been here for 5 years. Marcus has sat out a redshirt year. Marcus has won a Southern Conference championship. Marcus walked across that stage last year and graduated in the Furman ceremony. He's graduated from Furman. Marcus is working on a master's, which he's going to complete. He's completed 5 years. It's probably time. It's hard to be in an institution for beyond 5 years. And something that we talk about with our coaches is that, our job is to recruit them, it's to develop them, it's to help them. But once they get to the point of graduate, it's a point where we need to be comfortable with them potentially moving on as much as we want to keep them.
Yeah.
There is a certain point where they move on. Now, in some cases, you look at Slauson and Bothwell, like them coming back was the reason we won that Southern Conference championship. They made that decision to come back, and that's where they were in that space and time. But we got to be grateful to someone like Marcus that was here and that went through that, and he's just ready for something different. It's just where he is in that space. Now, what we've done, we've created in the last 5 years some really good retention when it comes to graduate programs that in the next year, one of the best things that our faculty's created is a 1-year master's for innovation and leadership that's going to allow students to either get an extra year at Furman. It's going to allow our student athletes to stay an extra year in a really dynamic degree. And it's going to allow our coaches to either add or replace people during that period of time that they want to replace on a 1-year basis when you look at the transfer portal. So I'm grateful to Furman because Furman's done the right things to try to help us do this. Because when I got here, this didn't exist. Mm-hmm. Now we have that. And you look at the success of Clay Hendricks' football program last year. That success is not possible without graduate programs. That success is not possible without an institution that finds creative ways to allow our students to stay here, continue to get educated. Because a couple years ago, we were losing athletes that they were done. There was nothing left for them to do.
Right.
And we couldn't get them to stay, and that was in multiple sports. So we've seen major progress.
Well, you've just answered one of the other questions about the graduate programs. I know your time is limited. We've got 3 questions left. Do you have time to fly through these?
Let's do it.
All right. Last scheduled FBS games 2 years away, if that's accurate. Most SoCon schools, the question said, have FBS games out further than 2026, 3 of them out to 2031. So is there any news about scheduling those games beyond where we are now?
Yeah, we've had the conversations, and I feel like this seems like it's a consistent question, maybe from the same person. I don't know. But we have a FBS game this year, 2024, 2025, 2026. And I don't know what the other schools are doing, and everyone's got their own different arrangement. Sometimes state legislatures are involved in this, just so everyone knows. Like there's private schools that operate certain ways, public schools that operate certain ways, and academies operate different ways. What I can tell you is that we've been in consistent conversations about games from 2027 all the way into the 2030s, that these conversations are going on, but there's circumstances around it for when and how they go together. So this is definitely a topic that we work on. It's something that's an emphasis for football. Football's got to work on this and get this right, because this impacts their budget and impacts their schedule. And it's one of those things that, not in a funny way, but sometimes these things all land together at the same time, and they all come out, and you're like, oh, it all came out in the wash in a week. Sometimes it takes longer to go through that process, because what we're dealing with on the other side is we're dealing with the changes that are impacting our peers in our region relative to conference membership and their own scheduling philosophy and TV expectations that are around them. So for as much progress as we make when we talk to these teams, there is a point where we have to be patient and work through the process with them in terms of what they need. I mean, you talk about Clemson today, putting that out there, a lawsuit to be in a different conference, like that impacts their scheduling. That impacts their decision-making. Like, as much as people want to say, well, you should do this, you should do that, we're talking to these schools. We know where they are. We know what they're trying to do and what they're trying to get done. So for us, it's just a process of being patient and in the scheduling. And it's not the most immediate thing that we're focused on. What we're focused on right now is 2024, 2025. And do we need to get those games? Yeah, we got to get those games. But the people that we've been talking to have just asked for patience in that process. And then when we get the games, we're really not going to announce them, because it's not our place to announce them when it's time to do it. So that'll all come in time and place, and we know what that is and what the importance of it is. But I'm not as worried about that today, Dan, as I am about a lot of other things that are going on.
The next question, and I'm assuming this was in the wake of losing Bryce, asking about the athletic department. Has it contemplated taking additional actions in regards to medical screening of the athletes, training of staff, or new equipment available during athletic events? And before you even go, I can say our medical staff, the training they have, the equipment they have, is top of the line. But I'll let you.
Yeah, I kind of read that question the same way, and I had said this must be someone asking about, is there anything we could have done differently with Bryce? And the answer is no. We have top of the line training staff that's led by Craig Clark, who's one of the best in the business, who was trained by Elaine Baker, who might be the benchmark for the business. We have excellent trainers. It should be noted that the 2 trainers on staff at football literally saved Bryce's life. They allowed him to be able to get to the hospital. They enabled his family to be there when he was there, because had they not done what they did, he would have passed here. It had nothing to do with practice. He was there as an observer.
Yeah, he was watching.
He was watching. He was not participating. There was nothing that happened as along that process. I'll tell you that from a training standpoint, one of the other benefits that we have is we have 2 hospital sponsorships here. We have our athletic sponsorship and a great relationship with the doctors and the staff and administration of the Bon Secours hospital system. And we also have Prisma here. Prisma is a part of everything we do with our on-campus facilities with our students. And we've got the best of both. The same thing, when you look back at what took place and how everything handled, was one of the conversations we even had about Craig. I mean, Bryce was pre-screened. Bryce was working with cardiologists, not about his own health, but just for research and data that they were doing in Atlanta. I mean, they were on the phone with him. These things that took place could not have been detected, as sad as that sounds, in a screening process. So I've got nothing but confidence in what we do. We've got the equipment. They even went out and fundraised last year as a part of Dins Day, and they got defibrillators. I mean, they had that as a part of the fundraising process, which ironically had nothing to do with what this was, but they had the equipment. The ambulances, the campus safety was here immediately. And in this case, there's nothing they could have done to prevent it. What I do take great pride in is I think our coaches and our medical staff and Furman as a whole they go above and beyond to make sure that we do the right things and that we go about that process. But I would say rest assured that anything that could have been done in this situation was done. I was actually blown away by the fact that Bryce had been pre-screened as a part of research with cardiologists that, they knew his vitals. They were talking to the doctors in the hospital about it because they knew this whole thing ahead of time. It just, it really speaks to the level of which our staff goes through that process. So the hardest part about a tragedy is sometimes it's just a tragedy, and it's God's will in terms of where things are and what happens. But I could say without a shadow of a doubt that the staff handled everything the right way to the best of their ability. And then likewise, the doctors and Prisma and what they did at the hospital was just beyond what was imaginable. But I've got every confidence we're doing the right things.
Final question, now that you hit the benchmark with Timmons, fundraising and facilities-wise, what's the next priority?
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Whoever writes the next check?
Yeah, but honestly, Dan, that's part of it is one of the things in fundraising is you want to have a plan, and you got to have a plan for where you want to grow. And again, this isn't – I read this a little bit of football versus basketball. It's football and basketball. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have this amazing facility, Pierce Horton, then football might be more of a focus. If we had a better facility in basketball, you might be over here with this. Is so much of it, honestly, Dan, is where the donor writes the check. Like if there's interest and inclination and resources to do it, we move in that direction. We've been developing for several years now a master plan to address several different things that we need. Some of those things we've been more public about. Some of the things we'd love to have happen. We're excited to meet with our football base about ideas that we have for them, some of which will be operational, some of them will be capital, some of them will be endowment. It's the same with basketball, that adding a phase 3, a practice facility onto that facility when the time is right will help that building be more accessible to others. But there's things that we need with women's sports. There's things that we want to do to help support them at a higher level that we've identified. So I think a lot of these things we're going to continue to shape up. We meet about this stuff weekly, continue to see where the resources are. And I just say the next immediate priority is the next thing that we get done. It's what we work on next. But we've got a lot in the hopper to work on and things that we're excited about. And I have no doubt that we can continue momentum. But these things take time, in terms of what we're going to do. But we look forward to sharing these plans and sharing them with at a point in the near future as we take the next step forward.
Got a lot of ground covered today.
We got a lot done, and I appreciate everyone tuning in. We try to go a little bit shorter this time.
I don't think we accomplished that.
We might not have. But all I wanted to share also, if you're available, I know you're coming out of fall sports, coming out of winter sports, you're figuring out what's next. A lot to tune in for with our teams. Softball's got a doubleheader this Wednesday. This weekend they take a conference game against Western Carolina. I encourage you to come out for that. Women's lacrosse has got a big game against Wofford next Wednesday, March 27th. Join us here in the stadium. We'd love to have you. Some of us are going out to Clemson. Women's golf is out at the Preserve out there for a tournament this weekend if you get a chance to catch our women's golf team. Women's tennis has got a big matchup tomorrow, Wednesday, against Wofford. They're into SoCon play. And in men's tennis and men's golf are on the road, and track and field's up and running. But we got a lot going on at Furman. Want to wish everyone a very happy Easter. I hope those of you that are on spring break, Greenville County, are able to enjoy some downtime. But we're excited and rock and rolling as we're going through the final months of our academic year and just having a great year again.
All right, looking forward to pushing forward and seeing what kind of updates we can get when your time rolls around again.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you, Dan.
That is Jason Donnelly. Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Inside Furman Athletics. Back again with another release next Tuesday. Until then, for Jason, I'm Dan Scott saying God bless you and so long, everybody.